Well, that was no good. On today's episode of Locked On Raptors, Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com joins me to break down the loss to the Sixers 131-111 for your Toronto Raptors in Game 1 of their Eastern Conference first-round series. We'll dig into all that went wrong, how the Raptors lost the plot defensively, how they lost the offensive rebounding edge in the possession battle. We'll also talk about Scottie Barnes, who was fantastic until he got hurt. We'll talk about the fallout from that injury as well as the one to Thad Young's thumb. Plus, to close the show out, we will dig into some positives, reasons for optimism, and adjustments ahead of Game 2. That's all coming up on today's episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for being here.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1160 of Locked On Raptors for, it's Sunday, April the 17th, whenever we're recording this. You might be listening to this on Monday, April the 18th. Either way, this is serving as your Monday episode ahead of Game 2 on Monday night. I am your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the show at Locked On Raptors. And, of course, you can follow, subscribe to, rate, review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts and all the different podcast apps. You can also go to YouTube and join our nearly 2,000-person strong community of subscribed patrons to the YouTube channel for the low price of On the House. So please go ahead and do that. It's much appreciated when you take the time to support the show. And as always, a big thank you for making us your first listen of the day, a first listen that is brought to you by our friends over at Bet Online, who have you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online is where the game starts. All right, your Toronto Raptors are in a 1-0 hole in the first round of their playoff series against the Philadelphia 76ers. And on the show today to dig into all that went wrong, from the on-court stuff to injury stuff to, everything in between. Plus, we will dig into some optimism reasons for potentially, the Raptors turning this thing around, going ahead in Game 2 and beyond. It is Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com here breaking things down, hanging out on a Sunday, which is just a great service that he's providing today. How are you, man? How are you feeling after that, I would say, disastrous Game 1?
Yeah, worst case scenario, right? Completely. Raptors, get punched in the mouth, kind of don't play the non-Embiid minutes well. It started out okay. They cut the deficit to 3, and then it just all went to shit.
Yep.
And so, and then just when you're thinking, okay, throw this one in the trash and move on to Game 2, Scottie gets hurt.
Yeah.
And so that is the worst of it all. So, yeah, it couldn't have gone much worse. But, rewatching the film this morning, part of why I asked if we could start this a bit later. There is a lot. There is a lot to fix defensively. Offensively, the Raptors were pretty successful, I thought.
Yeah.
Other than maybe, getting on the offensive glass a bit more, maybe creating more transition opportunities by creating some turnovers. But again, that comes down to defense. So, defensively, I think there's enough to fix to just focus in on Game 2 and, make a game of that and give yourselves a chance.
Yeah, I think defense is probably the place we got to start in this game. Offensively, we'll get into it in the final segment. I thought the offense looked actually pretty good and healthy and like they're going to be able to score in the half court against the Sixers team. Scottie Barnes not being available maybe changes that. We'll get to that in a little bit. But as far as where things went wrong defensively, I mean, we knew they were going to be aggressive and sending extra attention Embiid's way, and they did do a pretty good job of limiting Embiid's scoring touch, right? He only had 19 points in this game. He was 5 of 15 from the field. That's what you want. That kind of is in line with what the Raptors have done to Embiid in the past. But, this series was always going to come down to, and I talked about this on the Thursday crossover with Keith and Devon from Locked On Sixers, this was always going to come down to Embiid's growth as a guy who can navigate that extra attention. And he did a fantastic job of it in this game. A couple of beautiful cross-court skip passes, things like that. But also the Raptors didn't really make it all that difficult on him, I didn't think. There were maybe 2 or 3 instances where they actually kind of got that full swarm going where they actually made Embiid look uncomfortable. I think actually the first possession of the the third quarter, if I recall, was sort of the first turnover they forced all game. And I think that was kind of a good encapsulation of sort of their swarming defense. It might have been Tobias Harris that had that turnover, but still, they were not very good with their extra attention anywhere, particularly on Embiid. Where do you think things went wrong when it came to the defense? Like, is there something that is like an easy fix, or is it just a matter of, kind of rediscovering that sort of discipline they had down the stretch of the season where they were on a string, they were filling in space when they were rotating, and there was always kind of someone stepping in to fill the space. Like last night, yesterday afternoon, whatever the hell time the game took place, there was never really an instance where you saw that sort of on a string sort of, the feedback loop that we talk about with this Raptors team where everything's kind of working in unison and it just sort of suffocates and smothers offensive possessions. There were way too many instances where a guy goes to help and then all of a sudden there's a dude totally unattended to under the basket who's just getting an easy look. Are there any things that you saw in the film as far as like things they can touch up, things that specifically went wrong defensively, or was it kind of just like a big giant egg laid where everything went wrong and it's kind of impossible to sift through all those different elements?
Well, first off, with Embiid, I think you have to give him credit. He sort of came out and said, I'm going to play with great intensity, great effort, and play bully ball.
Yeah.
I'm going to get underneath the Raptors' skin and see how they respond. And the Raptors didn't really respond. One of the things I wasn't a fan of was starting out with OG on him and Scottie on Harden. I would have liked that reversed.
Right.
And I think the other thing too was, if anything, there were at times where you put OG in that position where now he is trying to act as the helper, where we saw in those previous two games where it was Siakam sort of coming over as the help. Now Siakam was still coming over from the corner, and he was doing that a little excessively. And so there was a lot of miscommunication. I think off the top, Fred VanVleet set a bad tone by picking up that second foul. The first one was a bad call, but that second foul where Embiid's got the ball under the basket, just let him dunk it, let it do whatever. You can't.
You don't need to Napoleon this one, man. Like, just take the L.
Yeah. You got to stay on one foul. That kind of opens the floodgates for Maxey. And then you see Anunoby get hung up on a screen when defending Embiid, and that opens up the driving lane for Maxey to get a floater. You had Siakam over helping off the corners. Boucher kind of came in and was a nightmare. Precious had his own set of miscues as well. Gary wasn't making open shots.
Yeah. So
again, it was a worst case scenario where no one really had anything. And credit the defense on Siakam as well early on, where they weren't really letting him get into the paint. That's kind of why we saw him shoot the mid range. He had a couple of nice passes, a couple of nice reads, and then Scottie was obviously awesome.
Yeah,
that was a special debut. Shame it came to an end.
Yeah, for sure. Back to the defense for a sec. We will get to Scottie and the sort of joy that was watching him almost put up a triple-double in his... He might have gotten there had he been on the floor for the rest of the fourth quarter. He looked that good. We'll get to that shortly. But yeah, with the defense, the other thing too is, part of the whole design against the Sixers is you're going to help off of guys, right? You're going to have to cheat a little bit off of Tobias Harris or Tyrese Maxey because you have to send that extra attention. And when Matisse Thybulle's not starting and you have Danny Green in there for the Sixers as well, that makes all of that sort of calculus a lot more difficult to make. And you're hoping that Tobias Harris replicates what he's done in the past against the Raptors, right? Where he's hesitant to take those corner threes. Maybe he does these little jab steps and kind of walks himself into bad shots or wasted opportunities or dead possessions. And it just didn't happen. And if Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey are going to play the way they did last night, I'm sorry, the Raptors have no chance of winning this series. The whole thing about this series was, well, Embiid's amazing, Harden can be great, but the supporting cast is a little bit suspect. If the supporting cast is not suspect, this Sixers team can hang with anybody. And I think you have to give a ton of credit to Tobias Harris last night. 26 points, 6 boards, 6 assists for Harris. Like, that is just a far cry from anything he's ever done against the Raptors in the playoffs. It was quite jarring to see him be more basketball player than Puddle for the first time ever in a Raptors Sixers playoff game or Raptors Sixers recent matchup in the last 4 or 5 years. Um, so that's a problem. And like, I don't know how that changes the way you approach Embiid. I don't really think it can. Like, you have to continue to send extra attention Embiid's way because you don't have one guy who can just kind of size him up and hang one on one. Would you change anything about the calculus of doubling Embiid, considering what Harris and Maxey did in game one? We'll get to Maxey as well in adjustments. I think there's a very clear adjustment the Raptors can make to try to slow him down. But as far as the Embiid stuff and the double teaming and the extra attention and the sort of dependence upon rotation, is it a matter of altering the scheme a little bit or just executing your regular scheme way better the way they have in the past against the Sixers?
I mean, honestly, more than the doubles on Embiid, it was the level of attention shown to Harden that I think could be improved. Like,
Sure.
there were times where Harden's just like he's dancing at the 3-point line, and whether it's Scottie or it was Scottie or OG or whoever it was, they were helping before Harden's even crossed the 3-point line.
Yeah.
And like Harden's just making the pass to the corner. Like,
Yeah.
that's way too much. Like, he's got to at least be inside the arc. Like, there's got to be some threat of a drive before you're helping off the strong corner.
Sure.
And so I think stuff like that is pretty easy to clean up. It was pretty, ridiculous that they were making that mistake in the first place. And so I think stuff like that will clean up a lot. With Maxey, I think one thing that Embiid does really well is sort of occupy his man to open up the driving lane.
Sure.
And so I think that's where other help has to be ready. Or you've just got to be more cognizant of whoever's on the ball, and that's something where I did feel there were multiple possessions where the Raptors didn't pick up the ball early enough, and then all of a sudden Embiid's like got his man over on the other side and just creating this straight line drive, and whether it's Maxey, whether it's Harden, it's like, hey, floodgates are open.
Yeah, I like the point you made about Harden in particular because I still like, even though the game went the way it did last night, I found myself feeling very not intimidated by the presence of James Harden throughout this game. Like, yeah, he had a stretch there. The Raptors pulled it to 11 in the third quarter. Then he had his own personal 5-0 run. Then he had that insane hit-ahead pass, like on the bounce to Tyrese Maxey, which, hey, credit to him. That was a gorgeous pass. He's a very good passer, as it turns out. But he was 2 for 10 on 2-pointers last night. He doesn't have burst. He can't get by really any of the Raptors defenders in single coverage. I think you have to just stick to single coverage on Harden. And if that goads him into trying to score a little bit more often, it's probably a good thing because it's not swinging to Maxey, who you don't really have the perimeter defense to stay in front of. And it's not a possession that's ending in a pocket pass to Joel Embiid or whatever it might be. Like, they have to be, I think, pretty disciplined in their single coverage on Harden until he proves that he commands more than just one guy. We'll continue on here and dig into Scottie Barnes' game and a few other items that are certainly going to dictate what comes up in this series. Thad Young's injury, too. We'll get to that in one sec. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Athletic Greens, who are a wonderful company. And you may be asking, you've been talking about this for a little while here. What is Athletic Greens? Well, it is a specially formulated powder. Really, it's what it is. It's a powder to make you have all the nutrition that you need in a day. It's really boiled it down to one sentence. It's very hard over the course of a day to get all the vitamins and minerals you need. We all have busy schedules. Cooking is a pain. Shopping is a pain. It's hard to get all the stuff that you need for your body to operate at full capacity. But AG1 Athletic Greens' wonderful formula has 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. Literally all the things. I have started taking AG1. They sent me a little bit once they came on with the network, and I have had it basically every day for the last few weeks, and it's made me feel a lot better. During the last couple of weeks, I've been dealing with COVID as well, and I've been taking AG1 in the morning to help ensure that I'm feeling all right, even though everything else in my body feels like garbage. I know I'm getting that nutrition. It is really the ultimate daily insurance. It's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. Those pills and supplements cost a lot of money. They do a lot of number on your stomach as well. Go with AG1 instead. It is just the better choice. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NBA network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NBA network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance with Athletic Greens. Go pick some up now. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar. It's that time of year where your New Year's resolutions are now long gone, but you can still always make the steps to be a little bit healthier, to indulge just a little bit less. I have a sweet tooth. I am not afraid to admit it. I eat a lot of sweets, but when I am really kind of in the doldrums and I'm feeling not so good about myself and I want to avoid those sweets, I'm going for a Built Bar instead because it's going to give me the sensation of eating something indulgent and sweet and tasty, but I know that it's actually good for me. It only has 130 calories on average in your standard Built Bar, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has about twice the calories, 8 times the sugar, and dozens of net carbs. You don't want that. Go and get yourself a Built Bar instead. They got flavors for everybody, nut and nut-free options. They're keto-friendly. They got fruity flavors. They got more sweet confection flavors. Go check out the website. They got limited time flavors that pop up all the time. Go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order. That's the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. And we continue on your first listen of the day here, breaking down the Toronto Raptors Game 1 loss to the Philadelphia 76ers, 131-111. Not great stuff. Great stuff, however, from Scottie Barnes in the 32 minutes he played before leaving this game with an injury. We will talk about the injury and what it means going forward, but probably should just take a second here to reflect and think about how awesome it was that Scottie Barnes came out in his first ever playoff game in Philadelphia with that bananas ass crowd and put up 15, 10, and 8 on 4 of 6 shooting, 7 of 9 from the line. He just looked incredible, Vivek. Thoughts on Scottie's playoff debut? Really, I think if you're taking a big picture view of game one, even if this series perhaps is going off the rails quick, I think a lot of people can rest easy knowing that Scottie Barnes is bloody fantastic and was certainly not scared of the moment.
Yeah, he is the man. He is the guy. And I thought that was really, really special. I mean, right from when he had that first, he had the post up on Maxey where he went in early.
Put him in the bucket, yeah.
Transition, and yeah, Embiid couldn't come over to help soon enough, and that kind of set the tone for his game. And you just see it's like, no matter what you try and take away, he's got so many ways of impacting the game that he's just gonna find a way every possession, anytime he wants, really. And he had the no look pass for the cutting Boucher, and took the mid range when it was there. Really special performance. I think back to Dwayne Wade, who had like a really nice rookie season, and then the playoffs came, and it was like, oh, like this is his team like now. And I think much the same way this is going to be Scottie's team pretty soon. And the ceiling with him is pretty scary to think about. I mean, it's very exciting for Raptors fans. And there's a lot to look forward to. Thankfully, the X-rays are negative in terms of a long-term outlook. I still, I'd be surprised if he played, any further part in this series, just from the way it looked. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. But yeah, it's just really, really unfortunate. I mean, he was just talking about how it's been a long wait to just play basketball again. This,
Yeah.
from game 82 to the playoffs, and after the week off, he was just raring to go, and you saw that, and now he's gonna have to wait again.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly puts a damper on the rest of the series if he's not available. We'll get to that in a sec here. But yeah, it was just really, really special to see that dude in that environment in particular just kind of come out and seem just completely unworried. And I think you saw kind of a bit of a validation of what the Raptors seem to have been building this season, which, we've seen. Obviously, the season began with Fred VanVleet being very much the conductor of the offense, but it's slowly been ceded over to Pascal Siakam as the season's progressed, and he's become sort of the main figure. But really, what I think the sort of peak version of this version of the team is kind of a dueling two-headed snake thing where it's going to be Siakam and Barnes who really are the guys who create on most possessions and are the avenue to whatever good looks you're going to create, whether it's for themselves or for others. And I mean, they both have all the ingredients to assume that role, between the playmaking, between their own scoring touch, between the fact that Pascal's obviously a more advanced shooter at this point than Barnes is, but Barnes flashed a mid ranger last night. He's flashed it all season long. That seems like something that should come along at some point here for him on sort of a higher level, higher volume type of thing. But it just, to me, like, you saw what this team is going for, and I think, judging by the fact that they scored pretty comfortably against the Sixers, I think it's a viable path to having your offense work in the postseason. Is 2 6'9" dudes who can handle the ball like that and pass like that. That feels like a pretty decent recipe. They combined for 15 assists in the game. They really were the guys who created most of the positive possessions, not to mention what Scottie was doing in the open floor, which was just delightful. Kind of just running out, hitting passes for guys on the trail, stuff like that. He was just wonderful. Just an absolute delight to see. And yeah, really should, I think, be a bit of a balm if you are feeling worried, feeling upset about game one and where the series goes from here. That they're in good hands, I would say, as we move forward into the future of whatever this Raptors team is going to look like next year and beyond, with Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam kind of as the two heads of the snake. The injury, we'll get to Thad's injury in a sec too, but I mean, I'm operating under the assumption he's definitely not playing on Monday. I don't see how there's any way he turns around one day off and plays Monday night. If he does, congrats to Alex McKechnie for all the HGH he's stored, I suppose. But Thursday is game 3, or was it Wednesday?
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday, right? So yeah, you don't even get the 2 days off there. It seems like a long shot that he plays at least in the next 2 games. We don't know. We're recording this at 11:30 on Sunday morning, so we could get some more information, after this post as to what his status is going to be. But we're going to operate in the assumption he's not playing in game 2. If he's not available, does that kind of sewer the Raptors' chances entirely of winning this series, Big V? Like, it seems crazy to say that a rookie is the reason why they aren't going to win a series, but he was that good in game 1. He seems that important to them playing their matchup hunting game. And obviously he's huge as a sort of a disruptive force on defense as well. Where are you at with the Raptors' chances of hanging if they don't have Scottie Barnes available for the rest of the series, at least in game 2?
I think it would be a bit of an overreaction to think the Raptors can't win the series from here.
Okay.
I mean, if you think the Raptors can't win the series from here, then you probably shouldn't have been picking them to win it at all. I mean, I think there are some things that they can fix defensively. Again, we saw offensively they can get what they want. I think ideally Precious will slide into the starting lineup. I won't be surprised if Nick goes to Kem Birch and says, I want to keep Precious and Boucher off the bench together.
Yeah.
But I think Precious is the move because of his ability to defend both Embiid and Harden. No, I think when you look at those 2 games that the Raptors beat the Sixers with Harden in the lineup, they did that without Fred and OG. And so you've got Fred and OG now. And now you take out Scottie. So I still think the Raptors can win the series. I think it's shifted for me in terms of the range of outcomes. Whereas before the series began, I was saying Raptors in 6. I think it's shifted to anywhere from Raptors in 7 to Sixers in 5.
Right.
That depends on, what is Scottie's injury outlook. Can he make it back for game 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is? Can he play any further part in this series? And how do they respond in game 2? I think that's the biggest thing with the playoffs. Just focus in on game 2.
Yeah.
There's defensively a lot to fix, and you give yourself a much bigger chance if you can just set the tone in that first quarter and kind of control the pace a bit better.
Yeah, I think that is totally fair. I do think it gets complicated if Thad Young is also not available because you're just really short on dudes to execute
Yeah,
your scheme.
that's fair.
And, it just, I had Sixers in 7. I kind of believed in Embiid kind of powering this team through the series. And, uh, you know, so far so good, I guess, on that prediction through game 1. Even though he didn't have a big scoring game, I think the no turnovers for him, just an absolute huge bellwether, I think, for this entire series and how things are going to go. If he's not turning it over, you're going to have some problems if you're the Raptors. But, I do think there are certainly some defensive adjustments to make. I think, again, I feel pretty good about their ability to score in the half court. Maybe it's a little bit more difficult without Scottie, just because he is a guy who can size up Tyrese Maxey and go put him in the bucket whenever he wants. But I think Pascal, if you just kind of funnel more possessions through him, maybe give OG a little bit more responsibility, and then just kind of hope that Gary Trent Jr. is going to knock down some threes. I think there's a way to fill in what you're missing offensively with Scottie, but it is a tricky thing to overcome if Thad's not available as well. We should hit on that injury very quickly. It looks like a left thumb something. He is going to get more imaging today, it sounds like, as well. Maybe Alex McKechnie can pull the shoestring trick and make it work and have him better for the next game, a la DeMar DeRozan. But without Thad Young, what do you think the Raptors are missing? I think he's obviously been kind of the last sub to come in, usually not till the second quarter in most of these games. He seems like the least trusted of all of those bench guys, just in terms of their overall role within the scheme. But I thought the minutes he played were pretty effective, and I always have liked him as a guy who brings together the better Raptor players and sort of ties everything together in a nice little bow. Without him, what are the Raptors looking at overcoming here?
Yeah, him not being available is a double whammy, just because he can kind of be a Scottie light, right?
Yeah.
And provide some of that playmaking, provide some of that switchability, provide some of that scoring around the basket, maybe spot up, knock down, catch and shoot 3 from the corner. So I think that's a tough one. If he's not available as well, I'd like to think that, like you said, there's a bit of a wrap that can be put around that finger, and he can find a way to gut through it. And so, yeah, not having both available would be really difficult, but not impossible. I don't think the Raptors will be completely out of it for game 2.
Yeah, we are going to, I think, examine some reasons for optimism. It's been kind of doom and gloom so far, but we will look at some things that could go the Raptors' way coming up in just 1 second to close out the show. But first, want to tell you about our friends over at Bet Online. It's your number one source for all your sports betting stats and info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, injury updates, and everything you might need to be the informed bettor for this year's NBA playoffs or for the Major League Baseball season. And it's not just basketball or baseball. There's other sports on there too. If you want to get some money down on an NHL futures pick for the Stanley Cup, you can do that. The playoffs are coming up very, very soon here, just a couple of weeks away. Maybe you want to get on the WNBA season, for example, and throw some money down on the Phoenix Mercury and Kian Nurse and that super team they've assembled down there, winning the WNBA championship. You can go and do that as well. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to the playoffs, esports, Vegas casino games, and more. Head to the website today, use your mobile device, and learn more about the trends and the action at betonline.net, where the game starts. And we round out your first listen of the day here with Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com, looking for reasons for optimism going into game 2 for the Raptors against the Sixers, and maybe some adjustments that can be made that we haven't covered off just yet. I guess the thing to say here for me, as far as optimism first, is this was a game script that very much favored the Sixers, and I don't know if it's all that replicable. If it is, congrats. Doc Rivers, kudos to you for scheming the hell out of the Sixers over the last week or so, getting them ready for all of the potential sore spots. But this was a game, and this is a series between the Raptors, who are the number 2 offensive rebounding team in the NBA, and the most turnover forcing team in the NBA. They forced 0 first half turnovers against the Sixers. And look, the Sixers are pretty good at protecting the ball, but no one's that good at protecting the ball. And they also lost the offensive rebounding edge to the Sixers, who are like I said, what are they? Oh, they're the worst offensive rebounding team in the league, at least the lowest offensive rebounding rate. Worst is, I guess, a subjective thing. That's probably by design. But in this game 1, they had 10 offensive boards to the Raptors 7. The Raptors could not get those extra possessions. They lost the possession game and the field goal attempt game 84-82, which is very unlike them as well. I don't know if the Sixers can pull all of that off once again. If they do, huge credit to them, but where do you think the Raptors might be able to sort of gain back a little bit on the margins here? Is there a way they can kind of get back in the good graces of the offensive rebounding gods, for example, after just not having any juice in that department last night?
Yeah, so that's probably one area where, without Scottie, it becomes tougher to have that advantage. I still think, they've got enough to force turnovers. I think OG Anunoby's offensive rebounding has maybe been a bit underrated this season. And so I think he can go get it on the glass. But yeah, I think the turnovers is the big thing. I think the fact that Philly won, the possession battle, you look at, not only was it, 84, 82, they shot 10 more free throws as well. So I think you create the turnovers, that in itself should help you gain back that advantage. Pascal, I think, sort of figured some things out as the game went on. And, it was still 24 points on 50% shooting and 7 assists. So he was pretty effective regardless. Gary Trent Jr. has to be a lot better. I will say that the Raptors do not have a chance if he plays like that again. He's got to find some level of consistency, and it's the open shots that, especially in that first quarter where it's like, hey, they're putting bodies on Siakam, he's making the kick out, got to knock down those threes. And so I think if you get more from Gary, you create more turnovers, and you're just more solid defensively in terms of executing the schemes, I think we'll be in for a much closer contest in game 2.
Yeah, I tend to agree. As much as I think game 1 was a disaster, I think, like I said, it's going to be tough for Philly to go and give that was like one of their best punches. If you follow anyone who's covering the Sixers this season, Adam Aronson, Derek Bodner, etc., they're all like, that was like the best game the Sixers have played all season long. Like, it was pretty much a flawless performance from them. And you just can't bank on a flawless performance every single night in the playoffs, because teams are going to adjust and figure things out to make you uncomfortable. One thing I think the Raptors can do, and I made this point on Twitter yesterday, and I am growing more and more steadfast in this belief. They left Fred kind of on the island against Tyrese Maxey. Gary Trent Jr. a couple times as well. Didn't go super well. I think there's a very clear defensive alteration the Raptors can make here, and it's to make OG Anunoby essentially a Tyrese Maxey shadow. He has been their guy to snuff out like speedy guards all season long. Trae Young comes to mind the most, but he's been their ace in the hole against slippery guards who are maybe a little bit too quick for Fred to contain. And I think there's a pretty clear switch you can make where you can flip-flop the way you've been guarding things a little bit. Stick OG on Maxey. You're able to switch any pick and rolls, and he can switch onto Embiid if they do run Embiid Maxey pick and roll. You can leave whoever you want on Harden, and I feel pretty comfortable about them in single coverage, whether it's Trent, whether it's Fred, whether it's Pascal, which I think is maybe not a terrible idea either. You don't want to risk the foul baiting, I suppose, but I think there's a world in which really anyone can hang with Harden in single coverage. And if you kind of have OG there to just sort of snuff out the Maxey threat, and take him one-on-one and sort of guard in isolation if Maxey's working in those lineups, for example, where Embiid or Harden or both are on the bench. Like I think that's maybe the move I would make here, just because he's been so damn good at limiting those slippery guards this season. Yes, that takes him away from the central part of the action at times, but I also think there will be plenty of switching and enough opportunities for him to impact the game on the interior, whether it's on Embiid, whether it's switched on to Harden, whatever. It's never going to be one guy guarding someone for 48 minutes, but I do think OG on Maxey is the switch I would make, and just really kind of have him key in there. Because if Maxey's going off for 38 points, you got no chance, man. And I think the guy who can most comfortably stay in front of him is probably OG. What say you to that idea?
I would say I still prefer OG on Harden. I think in terms of containing Harden, I still think the playmaking aspect is very good.
Right.
And once he's able to, whenever Harden was on Trent, I thought he kind of had his way. I didn't think that went well enough to think that that's an option. And so, in terms of the hierarchy, I'm still looking at Harden as more of a priority than Maxey. I'm thinking that Fred has just got to play better.
Right.
I think he'll be the first to admit that he wasn't good enough, and I think obviously the fouls early on took away some of that aggressiveness that he's accustomed to. So I'd like to see that again before I give up on it.
Right.
And then if all hell breaks loose again with Maxey, then maybe you got to look at the way you've kind of got it set up.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it kind of changes too the whole complexion of everything if Precious is starting in place of Scottie, right? Because I
Yeah.
figure Precious gets that Embiid assignment. He's probably switching pretty liberally onto Harden in that situation. And again, I don't know how that changes who you want on Harden as the primary in those spots. Maybe it's still OG, and you want OG to switch on to Embiid. I guess the other sort of thing to add to this is, and sort of is part and parcel to it, is I kind of would prefer Siakam to be a little bit more part of the action, I guess. So he was just kind of guarding Harris last night and helping off of him. And as much as Siakam's a great guy who just fly out to the rim or fly out to the 3-point line and contest those shots, and sort of he can do the help and recover thing better than pretty much anyone else on the team. He's been so damn good sort of in the middle of the action, mucking things up with his arms and his rim protection and just sort of his general presence and positioning and defensive awareness. I wouldn't mind him being a little bit more central to the action. Yes, you run the risk of him picking up cheap fouls on James Harden or whatever, but I kind of like the idea. If you move OG over, that invites the possibility to stick Siakam more centrally in the middle of the thing, and you can throw Trent on Harris or something like that, or Trent on Green. I don't mind Fred chasing Green around or whatever too. It just feels to me like there's a few different alterations you could make to make it a little bit more of a sort of conducive setup to the Raptors doing what they want to do in the half court and sort of executing there's scheme. But there's no easy answers, man. Joel Embiid's enormous and is a problem and is terrifying, even if the foul grift on the part of the Sixers is very real as well. I by the way, that's not why the Raptors lost this game. Yes, there were some bad foul calls. Just blanket statement. They did not lose this game because of the refs. They lost this game because their defense was truly miserable for the entirety of the game. The fouls didn't help, but at some point, you have to accept that a 7'3" dude is probably going to pick up some fouls against a team that's just kind of clawing up at him 6 inches to try to get the ball away. So whatever. Embiid, sure, maybe he's a bit of a reckless player, clumsy player. I'm not going to hear anything about, he intentionally hurt Scottie. That's insane to me. It was a basketball play. I don't know why that was a thing last night either, but regardless, I don't need to wade into those waters right now. Optimism. Let's get happy. Let's get eager and think about things from game one that make us feel good and warm and fuzzy inside, things that could translate into game two. Start anywhere you want. Maybe it's just you look at the third quarter where they pulled it back to 11 and started playing actual Raptors basketball. Maybe you got to bottle that. Or is there something that gives you some optimism going forward from game one to close out the show on a high note?
Yeah, I thought Pascal was pretty good.
Yeah.
So I think if you have him leading the charge right from the get-go. OG, I thought had a poor first 5 to 6 minutes, and then
Mm-hmm.
gradually caught his rhythm and looked
Yep.
good. I thought those were important minutes towards the end there in that fourth quarter where he could just get some reps. Um, Fred knocking down the three, that
Yeah.
was important.
Better than 50% from both 2 and 3 last night. Not something I would have expected in this matchup.
Yeah. And so, if he can just step up the defense, then you're feeling pretty good about Fred. And then, Precious as well, going from the first half he had to the second half, I
Yeah.
thought he was much better, especially that third quarter. It gave the Raptors some really good moments. Those flashes that he has, he's blocking Harden, he's blocking Embiid, he's driving by Embiid for an and one dunk. So those are the things that you want to bottle up. And then, yeah, of course, Gary just has to be better.
Yeah, Gary's got to be better. Boucher's got to be better too. I think that's kind
Yeah.
of the slept on one here. You can't foul out in 15 minutes, man. Like, it's
Yeah.
just you can't do it, especially when you are one of the guys most physically equipped to execute the Raptors' defensive scheme, and you're one of the best offensive rebounders on the team. Like, he's really,
Yeah.
really important to the way the Raptors are going, like the avenue to winning this series for the Raptors. And if he's going to play like he did last night, that is really kind of cutting out a lot of the things that get you to where you want to go if you're the Raptors.
Yeah.
I do think the point
I,
of sorry, go ahead.
what I was going to say, I'd argue 3 of those calls were bogus. There was one where he was
Sure.
vertically contesting Embiid. There was one where Milton had the kick out. You can't reward Milton for that. And then
Yeah.
even the one where Milton just like ran right into him with the Raptors in transition.
Sure.
Like that was just a soft call. So that part of it was tough, but I mean, he had enough defensive miscues to where it's like you just
Yeah.
expect better from him.
Yeah, and like I don't think obviously, I guess the thing about this series is it is kind of a test case for this whole concept that they're building a team around, right? And I don't think they're gonna know fully like what the grand vision is going forward after one series or anything like that. It's a small sample, things happen, but I guess one of the sort of mysteries is this new version of Chris Boucher that we saw in the regular season something that can translate to playoff basketball. And as much as he was bad yesterday, I kind of think what he does should translate pretty well, right? Like he plays good defense and he offensive rebounds, like and knock down the odd three. There's no reason that shouldn't carry over. So I don't think his game one performance is some sort of proof that the new Chris Boucher is actually still just a regular season ass player. Like I think there is plenty to hope for in terms of improvements from him in the next game. And yeah, I mean, the Raptors might be down to like 6 guys you can trust, perhaps, but I think they do have sort of the system and the sort of concepts in place to still give the Sixers plenty of trouble in this series. I guess lastly here, if Thad and Scottie are both out, do you see anybody from the deep bench getting a look here? Malachi Flynn maybe for a little extra ball handling. I don't know. Like it doesn't really fit into the defensive side of things, but who do you have in terms of the next set of guys? Maybe it's just Kem Birch sliding in as the 7th man, and then they go with 7. Classic Nick Nurse style. But anyone sort of beyond the regular trusted core who you think might get some run here?
If you're looking for a bit more of that offensive rebounding punch, a bit more of that ball handling, I would not be surprised if you see Delano Banton in the mix. I think he could squeeze in there, depending on what the Raptors are looking at. But if there's some spacing that's needed, potentially Utah, those are maybe the 2 guys that I would earmark. But yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty tough sledding for a team that really, as Nick Nurse said after the game last night, I thought it was a really telling quote, is like, we're not a team that can not have everyone kind of not firing on all cylinders, right? Like we're the kind of team that needs everybody kind of at least having an average game. That's what he said, I guess, to the guys after the game, is like, you don't need to be great, just be average. And they had too many guys who were below average. That said, the guys who were average or better, all the guys who are the most important parts of the team going forward, which I think should also sort of like big picture soothing. The guys who matter most look pretty damn good. And that, I think, portends good things both for this series and beyond. With that, we will leave you there. Went a little bit long, but there's a lot to dig into from game one, as there always is after a game one. Big V, thanks so much for hanging out, man. It was great picking your brain on this game. And of course, you're doing lots of great work covering the team over at Raptors.com. Where can people check out all your work in addition to Raptors.com? Because you got a million things going on, dude.
No, besides that, it's just CBC Sports right now. Keeping busy with that. So, you can follow whatever I'm doing on Twitter as well at Vivek Jacob. I'll probably post a bit of a video breakdown of all the first quarter miscues that I saw. And really, that's it. Like, I don't think we need to think too big picture here. Just zone in on Monday, game 2, first quarter, set the tone, and then just play it out from there.
Yeah. And even if the Raptors lose game 2, they're going back to Toronto with no Matisse Thybulle in tow. He wasn't like a huge impact guy last night, but like there's a lot of series left here. I do think things get pretty tricky if you don't have Thad or Barnes for the rest of the series, for example, but we don't know what their status is just yet. So we'll wait and see and hold our breath on that one, and hope the Raptors can make some adjustments and, put Doc Rivers on his heels. I got to give credit to Doc, man. He coached the shit out of the Sixers all week to forget game 1. At the risk of gassing up a guy who loves to cough up huge leads in series. He did a really good job, I think, getting the Sixers ready for this one. It's okay to tip your cap when a team plays well as well, in addition to trying to find where things went wrong. And the Sixers played just about as well as you can expect. We will wrap it there. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. We'll be back again on Tuesday after game 2 to break it all down for you. And of course, we'll have the series covered in depth all week long and hopefully for a couple weeks long. And thank you, as always, for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Go make your second listen of the day. Locked on NBA. They're covering, of course, all of the playoff action. There's so many games, and they are breaking them all down wonderfully over on the Locked on NBA YouTube channel and on the podcast app. So go check that out. And we will talk to you again on Tuesday with another episode of Locked on Raptors. Bye-bye.